All right, Dr. Siri, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I am extraordinarily excited to have you here with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And I was wondering if you could give our audience a little bit of a inside look to what did life look like for little Siri growing up?
Wow. You want to go there?
I'm going. We're going.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Texas
Awesome.
during the Jim Crow era. And, so I saw my father go to bathrooms that said colored only. And I would go to Woolworths and we could only sit into the arena where only for coloreds. So yes, I was raised in that era.
Hmm.
And I went to elementary school in Texas. I went to kindergarten. There I was the valedictorian in kindergarten and the uh, junior high school. That I came to California when I was in the 10th grade.
Yeah.
But it's so I was right. We There was a whole thing. We could not go on the other side of the tracks.
Hmm.
Black people had to stay on side of the railroad tracks. You couldn't go the other side. Segregation was real.
Yeah.
But
I'm
you
curious.
asked.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. I'm curious because, before this, I was watching some of your stuff, some of your interviews with like Katy Perry and Chief Keef and all these which by the way, they are beyond amazing. Like I've got sucked into all of these, sessions that you're doing with these people. And what was really interesting is you go deep with them and the way you articulate things is brilliant. And so I would be curious because you do a lot of this deep work with other people. For you, what was sort of some of the takeaways that you've built awareness around in your life? And what are the lessons you've taken from that, from growing up in the Jim Crow era and growing up with some of those things happening as a kid?
Well, you become very sensitive. It's like I can walk in a room and I can spot Judas out in 10 seconds.
Hmm.
I've worked in social service agencies where I could see the person that hated me. It'd take me less than a minute. I remember I worked in one social service agency and I walked in and I got hired on the second tier. I was the clinical director.
Hmm.
Uh, and, uh, and so I said, "Who's in charge of the agency?" And so they said, "She is." I said, "She is?" They said, "Yes." I said, "She must never see me." I said that when I first saw her. And I was there
Wow.
for 4 years, and I never saw this woman in person. And she's in charge of the organization. Big, huge organization in the Black community. And she was Caucasian, and I was licensed and a doctor. And I knew if
Right.
she saw me, that she would know I know who she is.
Hmm.
And I dodged that woman for 4 years. Truth. And I would come into my office sometime at the end of the year. I'd have a $10 an hour raise, a social service agency,
Yeah.
$10 hour raise, on my work. She had never seen me. That's
Hmm.
just how much my work was going over this huge agency. People will get hired and they'll go like, "Oh, you're Dr. Siri? Oh my God, the clients talk about this. And
Yeah.
so then one moment, something happened. I was the clinical director, and the counselors came to me and they said, "Oh, we're going to have supervision." I'm going like, "Supervision? They have never asked for supervision." I always have to go
Right.
around very humbly and say, "Can we have supervision this week with your caseload? Can we do it on this day?" And then when they come and ask me for supervision, I know something's up. So anyway, they tell me something that has occurred. I said, so what do you want me to do with this information? They said, we want you to go tell the executive director. And this is after I've been there for 4 years.
And this is that woman.
That's that woman. Now, if I would have known what I know now, I wouldn't have gone. But I went,
Hmm.
and so I said, well, it's come to my attention that this has happened. And so this lady said, oh, yes, I've already talked to the individual about that. I already know. Yeah. So thank you for telling me. Now, in that moment, she knows that I know that they're having a sexual relationship, and I get fired in 1 month. Now, I saw her on the first day, I knew who she was. So, raised in Jim Crow, you develop that sensitivity. You develop a heightened sensitivity. Nobody can fool me, white or black, for that matter of fact. I got
Yeah.
3 eyes.
You got the radar up
I
all the
got
time.
3 eyes. I even had a client one time, and he said, he was talking. I said, it's very difficult for me to say this to you. He says, what? I said, I don't think you're telling me the truth. And he said, I'm not. And then after that, we had the best sessions.
That's awesome.
Yeah, you
So
can't lie to me without, I want to catch it eventually.
right, right. And that's why you're so brilliant at what you do, I'm sure. Right?
Mm.
That's just an element that makes you who you are. And so let's say we jump back to when you're a little bit younger. I'm curious for you, let's say we go back to high school. Take me into, what was going through your mind? Did you in that moment say, I want to be a therapist and I want to do some of these things and I want to help people, and in high school you knew that, or take me into your world in there?
Well, in high school, I came from this small town in Texas, and I come to this big school here in Los Angeles, Manual Arts. There was 3,000 students in the school. I was like, oh my God. And I love my grandmother. And so my grandmother, of course, was going to come and visit and watch me graduate.
Yeah.
And so when I saw this huge school population and I went to the first graduation, and each class had 1,000 students in it, and the only person that stood out was the student body president. And I said, I must become student body president so my grandmother can see me.
Mm.
And I became the student body president. That was my plan in the 10th grade. And no one knew it but me.
Right.
Yeah. And I became the student body president. I was voted boy most likely to succeed, the most
Let's
outstanding
go.
student out of uh, class of, I think it was like 800, 900. Is so interesting. And the individual who was number ninth in the class, I was number 10, is now Shirley Weber Nash, who is now the California State Secretary of State.
Amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
So let me ask you this then. So I think from the outside, right at that point, everybody goes, "Oh, Siri's got his life together and he's doing all these things." From the outside, I'm curious if we took a dive into your mind at that point. You've accomplished this. Your grandma sees you. You stand out. You're the student body president. It's phenomenal. I'm sure you're full of joy. And deeper in you, would you say you had an idea of what you wanted to do with your life at that point, or what was
No,
next after you became student body
I
president?
just knew I needed to go to college. That's all. My family was middle class, and so my mother was a teacher, my stepfather was a teacher, my aunt was a teacher,
Hmm.
and so teaching was the only thing that blacks of that generation who were of middle class status could really a- achieve with
Yeah.
ease. And so I went to college in Carleton College, which is in one of our cities now getting a lot of attention. Minneapolis, it's not in Minneapolis,
Mm,
it's like 40 miles south of Minneapolis, Carleton College in Northfield, Minnesota. And yeah, I got my BA in psychology
hmm. And
there.
so was the goal, I'm going to become a teacher?
No, it's so interesting. I remember in the sixth grade, you have these aptitude tests, these vocational
Yeah.
tests, and I remember saying, "I will." You said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "An actor or a psychologist." I remember that
In sixth grade.
in sixth grade.
Did
I
you know
think
any psychologists? You must have.
no. I think children, we have that pineal gland, that soft spot in the baby's head.
Yeah.
And parents think it's all about them. They're to be the caregivers of this soul that has been given, entrusted to them. They're not supposed to make them them. And so I think children come in already with an awareness of who they are. And it's up to the parents to help guide that.
Hmm.
Like I get so many individuals like, their parents, of course, want them to go into secure professions to be a doctor or a lawyer or this or that. And that's not the call of that individual. And
Yeah.
they eventually become it and they're miserable. They want to do something else. So I think, I already knew. And my
Yeah.
parents didn't have a heavy hand on me. They sort of let me sort of be free in a way. Yet
Yeah.
I didn't need to be really corralled. I wasn't, I remember my mother saying at one point, "Oh, he's not a bad child at all." So I sort of came in with, some,
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
uh,
It's interesting
purity
you say
there.
that because my parents have had a similar philosophy where they're just kind of like, you'll figure it out, just like we're here to guide you. And
Mhm,
my mom's always said, encourage, don't discourage. And
mhm,
always just encouraged me to explore things, try things. And, I'm not quite where you are, but it's allowed me to, really create like this beautiful life because I think like you said, I'm following this sort of internal guiding system that I have,
mhm,
opposed to what do my parents think I should be?
mhm,
What would look good in society? It's more so like, well, no, what inside me do I feel is really pulling me? And I think for anybody that's trying to figure out their life, that's something that you really want to tap into. And I would be curious your perspective on that. Let's say someone's listening to this, what would your thoughts be on sort of tapping into that person that you kind of said you're almost born to be and you are like how do people tap into that?
Well, I can put it into words now, but I don't think I consciously knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
I was just surrendering to myself,
Mm,
you know. I was just being with my spirit. I was just listening to the call of my soul, as I always have done. And I've never had a job. I mean, being a therapist is not a job. I don't know if it's like any doctor, clients just come. You know what I
yeah.
mean? You don't sign in a timesheet. When I worked in social service agencies, of course, that was a job. But even then, I was contracted. I wasn't really always an employee.
Right.
And so I had a career as a dancer. I danced all
Hmm.
over the world and Europe. I had contracts in Africa and Asia. I danced throughout on television with Juliet Prowse and Eartha Kitt and Donna Summer and on the Academy Awards. I mean, you don't go into dancing to make money and
Right.
because you have to dance. I was like, I have to dance. That
Yeah.
was the call of my soul. Then that
So
that was no longer the calling. Then I went into yoga and I made a living teaching yoga privately. Again, not a job, way ahead of my time, but listening to the call of my soul. So only that individual, him or herself, hears that whisper.
dang.
I tune into the whisper.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I love that. And so walk me through this process then. So sixth grade, I'm gonna be a psychologist. You go into
Or
college
actor.
or actor. Okay,
That's right.
okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Psychologist or actor.
that's right.
And you go to college, and then when does dancing become a thing? Is that something you did growing up? Is that something you pursued starting in college? Because to have the success you had in that world, it doesn't just happen magically, right? So fill us in there. What do those junior days sort of look like in that part of your life?
Well, I was always talented and skillful dancing. My parents used to say, come on in here and show us the latest dance. I always wanted to show me.
I
And then when I went to
love that.
college, oh God, Carleton College, I know the almanac was rated the 19th best college in the nation. It was very hard to get into and very hard to get out of. Just to get my VA, I had to take a 3 hour written in the morning and a 3 hour written in the evening and a 1 hour oral exam way back in the 70s. That's
Yeah.
how that college, tough, rough. And so anyway, it was one day I was just studying. I was just like bored out of my mind. And I was walking on this beautiful campus, and I went past the gymnasium, and I saw all these people in there, and they were dancing. And so
Hmm.
I walked in, and so I said, "What's going on here?" They said, "Oh, it's an audition for a musical." I said, "Could I audition?" So they said, "Yeah." And they put my name down, and then I went up audition, and then you know how you have they call the 4 or 5 people, and you do the combination.
Yeah.
And I did the combination, and then they said, "Okay, you can leave." I said, "Can I do it with the next group?" I do nothing about an audition and anything. I was just like, "Can I do it with the next group?" And they wound up passing me, giving me a solo part in
No way.
Kismet was the musical. And the college review came out and said, "This is the best dancing Carleton has seen in years." And then my senior year, the president's wife of the college took a real, liking to me and my talent. And she got me a scholarship to go to New York my
Hmm.
senior year and study with Alwyn Nikolai for a whole semester. And I had enough money left over after that scholarship to go to Minneapolis and study with Nancy Hauser. And I would
Wow.
go up there after class, drive 40 miles 2 or 3 times a week to rehearse with the dance company. And then the company would perform, and it was like I would be reviewed. It was like the most talented member of the dance company is, and they would go on and just rave about me.
Hmm.
So when I came back to LA, I, was still into the dance bug. And then I worked with Donald McHale, who just recently died about 2 or 3 years ago. And he was my dance master, and I studied with him. And then I
Yeah.
got into the whiz on Broadway, and
So it's interesting hearing sort of your take on following that whisper and
mhm,
talking about it. And then I think it's another really interesting thing to hear that story and go, you can't say this is anything other than listening to that whisper, right? Because although maybe you were the dancer growing up and your family, you had the moves,
mhm,
which was awesome, but it's like you weren't really pursuing that.
no,
Yet when you found that whisper just by walking by a door and seeing some people dancing, you allowed that whisper to pull you.
yeah.
Um, and and so I would love to hear from you. Like, what would you say is the importance of, even if that whisper is just like, I think most people might walk by that door and go, I should go in and ask about this. Most people would go, well, you don't dance. Uh, you're not qualified. Like, what are you thinking? Yet you were like, no, my whisper's taking me this way. So like, I'm going this way. What would you say to people on that even if it's so small, look what it turned into in your own life?
Well, I think the only job we have to do this lifetime is to be the self. I listen to myself. I obey myself. I obey the whisper. That's what a lot of people don't do. They hear it and they don't obey it. I was telling one of my stubborn friends the other day, who is really just so slow in moving, I said, I'm down to maybe 3 seconds. When I hear the whisper, I do it immediately. Immediately. I don't question it and I just follow it. I'm now beyond questioning it. I know it is
Yeah.
never, ever wrong. Sometimes scary, sometimes
Yeah.
strange, but never wrong.
What was the strangest sort of pulling or whisper that you felt that you followed? You've sparked my curiosity now. What was one of the stranger ones that you went, really?
Well, I was sitting in my office pre-COVID, and and I just had a talk with the divine. I said, you know, God, you've given me all this wisdom, these great teachers. I said, no one will know about me but my clients, my one or two clients that come in during the week. And here I am behind this closed door, bound by confidentiality. I said, even when stars who I work with may get on a podium and win an Oscar, they always say, "My therapist." They, you don't, you're not, you're nameless.
Yeah.
I was like feeling that, and I was like, and so the voice came back. So you said strange. It came back as soon as I'm just sitting there, and it was talking to me as loud as I'm talking to you. It
Yeah.
said, "Yes, you are powerful. In one lifetime, you were extremely powerful, but you were arrogant. And you literally cut people's heads off. And this lifetime, you got to put them back on. And you must be graceful and humble this lifetime and just serve those that are sent to you." I said, "Oh, well, okay." So then I just began to selflessly serve whoever came to me and sat on my couch.
Yeah.
And then months later, or I can't remember, maybe about 6 or 7 months later, I got the phone call to do the show, The
Yeah.
Therapist.
Yeah.
And I don't remember auditioning. I didn't.
Yeah.
They just called me up and they said, "Oh, Dr. Stewart, we want you to." And I went, "Is this an audition?" They went, "No, you have the job." I have the job. And I said, "You want me to do what?" Therapy with celebrity rappers. And anyway, to make a long story short, when I went down and for filming for the first show episode,
Yeah.
I asked the producer, I said, "Why did you hire me?" And so he said, "I'll tell you after the episode." And then so the episode was over, and he said, "I'm not going to tell you who, but you worked with one of my family members and you did such a good job. We didn't consider anybody else." So that whisper told me to selflessly serve and to be humble,
Yeah.
be graceful. And somebody sitting on that couch got me that television show.
Yeah. Your your question or prayer, whatever you want to call it, your conversation was answered, right?
Mm.
And again, one of the strangest ways. That's so beautiful. Yeah. And for anybody, if you're listening to this and you want to check it out, where would you say is the best place for people if they want to look at that? I was on YouTube, watching
It was
everything. Is there?
it's all on YouTube now. It was on Viceland. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's called The Therapist for anybody. And if you just want to see Dr. Siri just be brilliant, it's worth it. So go look at that. One thing I would be curious is at what point did you go, because you did the dancing and you did yoga, and at one point did you go, I'm gonna fully dive into being a therapist?
I remember telling my yoga teacher, I called her up one day. I can't remember what year that was. And I said, I'm not going to identify as a yogi anymore. I'm going to be a therapist. I even knew then. So I just listen and I
Mhm.
follow, you know. And so, with my concentrated, dedicated, devotional, spiritual work that I do every day, I have heightened the voice of my spirit. And
Mm.
so I know when my spirit is talking. And and if my ego were to get louder than my spirit, I would know it, hopefully. But right now, my spirit is much more developed than is my ego.
Yeah.
It's like I don't, it's so interesting, the work and the celebrities that come to me and
Mhm. Yeah.
the accolades and the, opportunities I get. None of it goes to my head. I feel
That's
like I'm
awesome.
really just, doing the work of the divine. I'm just a vessel. I'm just a tool. I'm a means to,
Yeah.
live into the divinity of being.
What would you say? Because I mean, you're working with all these people that have done unbelievable things in their life. What would you say is like one of the biggest things you see that sometimes holds people back from being their true self?
Well, I work on a deep level.
Yeah.
I'm really psychodynamic. One of the theoretical orientations I sit in is the psychodynamic orientation, and that believes in the unconscious. And so we all are unconscious of our unconscious.
Hmm.
And so you have to go to a trained specialist like myself to help make the unconscious conscious. And that's the arena in which my intuition serves me very keenly. I can hear where there's a blockage in the psyche and their self worth. I have hunches, I have hints, and I'll just keep asking the questions and investigating until I go, there it is.
Yeah.
Mother told you you'd never be anything at the age of 3, and you never forgot it. And it's pressed in your subconscious. And that's the kind of stuff that holds people back. It's what you don't know about yourself
Mm,
that holds you back.
I love that. What would you say to someone that's maybe listening to this and maybe they've thought about going to a therapist, but they maybe have this stigma of, and I think the stigma is getting better, but sometimes people have that stigma of, oh, you go to therapy and kind of that. Like, what would you say to someone who maybe has that stigma, but they've they've always had maybe a whisper that's saying to them, you should go to see a therapist? Or what would you say to someone like that that's maybe kind of in that battle, I guess you could say?
Well, therapists, it's so interesting. I know I taught at university, I taught at 5 universities in my lifetime. And I remember in one of the classes I taught, I said, we as therapists in the media it's terrible press that we got, you know,
Yeah.
like for example, in Prince of Tides, you know, uh, the therapist goes to bed with her client, in anger management. He sleeps in the bed with his client, it's even in what is that? The Antoine Fisher story. The therapist invites the client over for dinner at his home. All illegal, unethical stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like the media before now in COVID time, we really had bad press. So the media did not help at all.
Hmm.
But as Freud and Jung, started out the field,
Yeah.
European, now we make it American, the therapist was intended to be the spiritual teacher of the West.
Hmm.
That is what we are intended to be, because psychotherapy is therapy of the soul.
Hmm.
And now they have gotten it all twisted and debauched from my perspective to where now it's therapy of the mind. Very limited. This cognitive behavioral stuff, from my perspective, is very limited. Yet that is the world in which we live in. It's what you can test. what is rational, what is tangible. And so we try to get into that realistic stuff. But see, it's just like I work into the arena of like Virginia Satir. She's humanistic. Nobody could duplicate her because she was so sensitive and she was in the moment and she was spiritual. And so I think, therapy these days has become where you can get licensed and still not be able to tune into the depth of the being of the person because you're so
Yeah.
rational, so logical, the whole thing. But I'm just saying, for someone who still has that stigma about therapists being, the intended concept is that we are to be the guides, the spirit guides in the West, because no religious leader has really grown from the West. Every religion has come from the East, and we are not a religion, but yet it is a form of guidance and elevation of consciousness. And so, if you find a good therapist, oh my God, you got something really good. If you get a good therapist,
Yeah.
one who's really empathetic towards you, who is not judgmental, one who is expansive in their consciousness. Oh my God, you got something good. So I don't know, you're holding yourself back.
Yeah. So
I've
would you
had
say
5 therapists in my life.
would you say the best way, what would you say is the best way to find? Like if you're like, all right, Siri, you got me. Dr. Siri, I'm committed. What would you say is the best way to find someone?
Well, number one, what do they say? If when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Mm,
You just got to open up. You just got to open up. You start your investigative process. It may come through a friend. You may just share with a friend. Like a lot of people, like I don't know how people find me. It's
yeah.
like, I don't do any PR. I guess I don't have to anymore. But anyway, clients refer, their friends to me. I can just, like, I got, several where they're like, my friend who's the, da 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 da,
Yeah.
and I go like, oh my God, and
Boom.
so
It happens.
just open up. You just open up. You
Yeah.
can go to Psychology
I love
Today
that.
and read the profiles of therapists there. They got another one called Zen Care, to where you can go there. They want me to sign up. I haven't done it yet. I just have too
Mhm.
much of an overload.
Yeah.
That yeah, so you can look on those sites and just read therapist profiles and or talk to your friends and see if they maybe have a good therapist that they could recommend you to.
I love that. Awesome. Awesome. Well, Dr. Siri, this has been beyond valuable. I'm curious if people want to find more information on you, everything you're up to, where's the best place to point everybody?
They can go to my website at sirisatnam.com, or my email is info@sirisatnam.com.
Perfect. All right, and we'll put all that in the show notes. And one last question I have for you, and I ask all of our guests this because we want to help people find direction, but we believe it's through action. And so I would be curious for you, like, what would you say is one thing that someone listening to this can do in the next 24 to 48 hours to start finding direction in their life?
Quit taking themselves so seriously. You know, this, I mean, in LA, everybody wants to be a star. Relax. Everybody is a star.
Hmm.
So just relax and just begin to star in your own life and be simple. And God will find you. You don't have to find God. If you just be yourself, God will find you.
Love that. Awesome, awesome. Well, Dr. Siri, it has been again a honor to have this conversation with you. You're just a beautiful soul and a wealth of knowledge, and so I just want to say thank you from my heart to yours for joining us today, for pouring into everybody, and just thank you so much for being here.
Okay, my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.